You check your watch. It's 4 in the afternoon, and the trail you're walking on doesn't look like the trail you started on this morning. Maybe you took a wrong turn an hour ago. Maybe it happened even earlier, and you just didn't notice. Either way, the light is starting to change, and something in your stomach tightens. This is how it usually begins. Not with a storm, not with a bear, not with a cliff edge. It begins with something almost embarrassingly small. A missed junction on a trail that looked exactly like the one you were supposed to take. For most people, the next 24 hours will be uncomfortable. For a smaller number, those hours will become the most dangerous of their lives. And the difference between the two outcomes has almost nothing to do with wilderness skills. Search and rescue teams across the country respond to thousands of calls every year. And when you look closely at the cases, a pattern shows up again and again. It's rarely the dramatic survival movie scenario people imagine. A review of a decade of rescue cases in Yosemite found that lower leg injuries were the single most common reason people needed help, followed by people simply becoming lost and by dehydration. A separate study from New Hampshire found that lost or missing hikers made up over 40% of rescue incidents there, with hiking being the activity involved most often. In other words, the person who ends up needing rescue usually isn't someone who ran out of food on day 3. It's someone who took a wrong turn on an ordinary afternoon walk. So here's the real question this video is built around. If you got turned around right now, on a normal trail, in normal weather, could you actually make it through the next 24 hours? Not survive in the dramatic, movie sense. Just get through the night safely and be found. The answer depends on a handful of decisions, and most of them happen in your mind long before anything happens to your body. Let's start at hour 0, the moment most people don't even notice. You take a turn that looks right. Everything around you looks familiar, because most forests look familiar. 10 minutes pass, then 20. A small voice tells you this isn't the way you came. Most people ignore that voice. They tell themselves the path will connect up ahead, or that they'll recognize something soon. This is the first decision point, and it's also the most overlooked one. The moment you suspect you're lost is the cheapest moment to fix it. Every minute after that gets more expensive. By hour 1, doubt turns into denial, and denial turns into more walking. This feels productive. It feels like you're doing something. But if you're moving in the wrong direction, you're not solving the problem. You're making it bigger. Search and rescue teams often begin looking near the last known point on someone's route. The farther you wander from that point, the larger the area they have to search, and the longer it takes to find you. This is exactly why the U.S. Forest Service gives lost hikers a very specific piece of advice, one that goes against instinct. Stop. Not keep walking until something looks familiar. Stop, stay calm, and think about how you got to where you are. It sounds almost too simple to matter, but stopping early is one of the few decisions in this entire situation that a person has complete control over, and it's the one most people get wrong. By hour 3, fatigue starts working against your judgment. You've covered more ground than you realize, and probably in more than one direction. This is where an interesting pattern shows up in research on how lost people actually move. Rather than wandering randomly, people tend to follow a small number of predictable strategies, sticking to trails, following slopes, downhill, or trying to backtrack the way they came. Researchers have used these patterns to build models that help predict where a missing person is likely to be. It's a small detail, but it tells you something important. Even in a moment that feels chaotic, human behavior is more patterned than people assume, which also means the choices you make in the first hour are doing more work than you think. By hour 5, a second problem starts competing for your attention, your body. Maybe you're not carrying much water. Maybe you're wearing cotton because it was a warm morning and nobody plans to be out past lunch. This is where the story quietly splits into 2 very different versions, depending on the weather. If it's hot, dehydration and heat illness become the immediate danger. Heat stroke is a genuine medical emergency, one that can escalate quickly, and it doesn't require a desert to happen. A sunny trail with little shade and a lot of physical effort is enough. If it's cold, wet, or windy, an entirely different threat appears, and it's more dangerous than most people expect. Hypothermia doesn't require freezing temperatures. It happens whenever your body loses heat faster than it can produce it, and wind combined with wet clothing speeds that process up dramatically. The warning signs are almost sneaky at first: shivering, then clumsiness, then confusion. And that last part is what makes hypothermia especially dangerous. It doesn't just make you cold. It starts affecting the exact judgment you need to get yourself out of trouble. Notice something about both of these outcomes. Neither one is about running out of food. In fact, for most healthy adults, going without food for a single day isn't the urgent problem people assume it is. The bigger threats are almost always related to temperature injury, and decision-making, not hunger. Somewhere around this point, thirst becomes impossible to ignore, and this is where another popular assumption falls apart. A clear, fast-moving stream looks clean. It looks like exactly what you'd picture as safe, untouched water, straight from the mountain. But looks don't tell you what's actually in it. Streams can carry microorganisms that cause serious illness, and health agencies specifically warn hikers not to assume that clear water is safe water. At the same time, refusing to drink anything while genuinely dehydrated in extreme heat carries its own risk. There's no perfect, risk-free answer here, just a trade-off that depends on how urgent the thirst actually is and what you have on hand to treat the water, even something as simple as basic filtration or disinfection. And while we're clearing up assumptions, here's another one worth mentioning. A lot of people believe that if you're lost, the smart move is to follow a stream downhill, because eventually it has to lead to a town or a road. Sometimes that's true, but streams also lead to waterfalls, steep drop-offs, dense undergrowth, and terrain that's far harder to cross than the spot you started from. Following water isn't a guaranteed shortcut back to safety. It's a gamble, and like most gambles in this situation, it can pull you farther from where searchers expect to find you. By hour 8, the light starts to change again, but this time it's disappearing instead of just shifting. This is usually where the emotional weight of the situation increases the most. Not because anything catastrophic has happened yet, but because darkness removes options. You can't see the trail clearly anymore. You can't judge distance the way you could an hour ago. And the temperature, in most environments, starts dropping right along with the sun. This is the point where an uncomfortable truth becomes obvious. What you're wearing right now was chosen for a 2-hour walk, not a night outside. Most day hikers don't carry an extra layer, a light source, or a way to protect themselves from wind and moisture, because the plan never included staying past sunset. But plans and reality don't always agree, and the gap between them is exactly where trouble grows. By hour 12, if you haven't found shelter or a way to reduce your exposure to wind and cold, your body is working overtime just to stay warm, which uses up energy you may need later. This is also usually when people start making their most questionable decisions, continuing to move in the dark, trying shortcuts, taking risks they wouldn't normally take in daylight. And this connects to something that shows up constantly in the data. Injuries, especially to the lower leg, are one of the most common reasons hikers need rescue in the first place. Not because trails are secretly dangerous, but because tired, stressed, poorly lit decision-making is a recipe for a bad step. There's something almost overlooked in all of this. The difference between being lost and being found isn't only about what you do. It's also about what searchers can perceive. A person sitting quietly under a tree, exhausted and cold, might be only a few hundred feet from a search team and never be noticed. This is why something as basic as a whistle carries real weight. 3 sharp blasts are widely recognized as a distress signal, and sound can travel and cut through terrain in ways that a shout, after hours of exhaustion, often can't. It won't guarantee anything. Nothing in this situation comes with a guarantee, but it costs almost nothing to carry, and it gives searchers one more way to find you besides pure luck. There's an old idea people love to repeat about survival, that panic itself can kill you. That's an exaggeration, but there's a real principle hiding underneath it. Fear doesn't directly hurt you. What it does is push you toward movement, toward shortcuts, toward decisions you'd never make with a clear head. The actual danger isn't the emotion. It's what the emotion convinces you to do next. By hour 18, if temperatures have dropped and you're still wet or underdressed, cold exposure and exhaustion start working together against you. This is often described as the most physically demanding stretch of an overnight emergency, not because of anything dramatic happening, but because your body has been fighting the same battle for many hours without a break. And here's where a popular idea deserves a closer look. The old rule that a person can survive 3 minutes without air, 3 hours without shelter, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. It's a memorable phrase, but it was never meant to be a scientific formula. Real survival time depends on so many shifting factors: temperature, wind, clothing, health, age, terrain, that no fixed number could ever apply to every person in every situation. The 3-hour figure for shelter, in particular, can be wildly different depending on whether you're in a dry forest in October or a rain-soaked mountainside in a cold front. Treating it as an exact countdown is one of the most common misunderstandings people carry into the outdoors. By hour 24, something becomes clear. For most healthy adults, in most environments, making it through this window is genuinely possible. But possible doesn't mean easy, and it definitely doesn't mean risk-free. A person can survive the night and still walk away from it with hypothermia, heat illness, a serious injury, or an experience that shakes their confidence for years. Surviving and staying unharmed are not the same outcome. So if the biggest dangers aren't food, animals, or some dramatic wilderness event, what actually determines whether someone walks out safely? It comes down to a short list of decisions, and almost every one of them happens before an emergency ever begins. Did someone else know your route and your expected return time? That single piece of information can completely change how quickly and how effectively a search begins. Did you stop moving early, once you first suspected something was wrong, instead of wandering further from where you were supposed to be? Did you have even a small way to protect yourself from wind, rain, or cold? Something as simple as an extra layer or a way to build a basic shelter? Did you avoid unnecessary risks in low light, the kind that turn a stressful night into an injury? And could you make yourself seen or heard if searchers came close? None of these require wilderness expertise. None of them require rare skills. They require preparation that happens at home, before you ever put your boots on, and a level head in the moment things stop going according to plan. There's an odd contrast worth sitting with here. Millions of people head out for short hikes every year, with nothing more than a phone and the clothes they woke up in, treating a 2-hour outing as if it could never turn into anything more. Meanwhile, some of the most experienced hikers, the ones who've spent years on trails, are often the most careful about the basics, telling someone their plan, checking the weather, carrying a little extra just in case. Experience doesn't make people take fewer precautions. It usually makes them take more. 24 hours lost in the woods isn't really a test of toughness. It's a test of whether a handful of small, unglamorous decisions were made before things went wrong. The wrong turn is rarely the real story. What happens in the minutes and hours after it? That's where the outcome actually gets decided. If you'd like to explore some helpful resources, you'll find them in the description.